For centuries, the mystery of death has ignited the human imagination, not because of its obscurity, but because of the possibility that after one's last breath, a door to another kind of existence opens. In the lands where ice bites stone and the wind sings forgotten names, the Vikings did not fear the end. They faced it with rituals that wove the earthly with the divine. They burned bodies, yes, but not to erase faces, but to uplift spirits. Every ship, every unleavened bread, every sacrifice had a voice in that ancestral chorus that rose toward Valhalla. What follows is not a reconstruction. It is an invocation. An attempt to understand how the dead were guided, how the living reconciled themselves with absence, and how smoke served as a bridge between worlds. Here the journey begins. Before starting this video, remember to subscribe and like. It all begins with wood. Not with a sword or with blood, but with the creaking of the forest as it is split by wise hands. The tree that will fall is not just any tree. It is chosen for its age, its shape, and what it has seen. Because it will be a ship, but it will also be a body. And it will be a body, but it will also be a temple. In those lands where the wind cuts and the rocks seem like sleeping gods, the altar of the final journey is built, a vessel that will no longer cross fjords, but dimensions. The elders, the blacksmiths, the children of the clan know the steps. There are no superfluous words. Only the rhythmic tapping of the hammer and the silence that surrounds death can be heard before it arrives. The great man's body lies in a temporary tomb. It cannot yet be touched. His soul still roams, and mistakes here could derail its path to Valhalla. For 10 days, the elements of the passage are prepared: ceremonial robes, sacred bread, ritual meat, and the knife that will open portals. The bread, kneaded with blood and seeds, is molded by the hands of the widows. It is not food, it is incantation. Each crack in the dough bears a name, each seed a memory. The bread must be baked without flames, as packs are baked, slowly over hot stones, without haste or distractions. When day comes, ravens watch from the cliffs. The boat has been raised to dry land, converted into an altar. Inside are objects that do not belong to the world of the living: amulets, mead, furs, tools for the afterlife. The deceased's animals are gathered. There is no chaos, no resistance. In this culture, even meat understands the cycle. Dogs, horses, chickens, all are ritually sacrificed, and every spilled blood is absorbed by the earth as if part of a silent exchange. The community gathers. The men line up, the women sing in whispers. The chosen slave, young and dressed in a white tunic, trembles. Not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment. She has been drinking, dreaming, saying goodbye for days. She knows that soon she will cease to be flesh and become symbol. When she boards the boat, the ancestors seem to approach. She doesn't see them, but she feels them. She doesn't name them, but she responds to them. The steps she takes are not her own. They belong to the women who have guided her, to the voices that have prepared her for a good death. The dark figure appears, the angel of death. She is not a monster, she is a function. Her knife doesn't cut, it transforms. The young slave is lifted 3 times, as if gravity had to surrender. She is asked if she sees her master. She says yes. That he is waiting for her. That he is calling her. Then, the sacrifice occurs. There are no audible screams. The shields resonate to cover the sound, but also to amplify it in other dimensions. It is the code of those who believe that to die for someone is to enter eternity with purpose. A torch is lit. The closest relative, naked, walks toward the altar. It is not an act of humiliation. It is one of total surrender. The wood burns. At first slowly, then frantically. Smoke rises with the scent of blood, milk, and ash. Something different can be felt in the atmosphere, as if time were suspended for a few seconds. Those present close their eyes, not out of sadness, but out of respect for the passing. What burns is not just the body. It is memory, it is identity, it is a message. And in the end, when the flames have consumed everything, someone says what must be said: he has arrived in an hour. And no one doubts it. Because in this corner of the world, death is not the end, it is a journey. And the ship, that extension of life, has fulfilled its destiny. When the smoke still hung over the warrior's tomb and the embers slumbered beneath the ashes, the elders gathered in silence. The body had passed, but the spirit remained among them. It was time to honor him with a banquet of his passing. It wasn't about satisfying hunger, but rather nourishing memory. Unleavened bread, made with blood and seeds, was baked and hung on hoops as a symbol of continuity. The meat of sacrificed animals accompanied the ritual. Each bite evoked feats, mistakes, and promises. Death was transformed into a legacy. This banquet also marked the new order. Whoever spoke the right words and drank without spilling took on the role of the deceased. The bread wasn't food, it was a covenant. And if someone wept, they were asked to transform their lament into song, so as not to anchor the deceased in sadness. Beyond, beneath carved stones, other bodies slept. Women with keys, men with tools. Each object chose its fate in the afterlife. Stone boats marked the graves of fishermen, builders, and clan weavers. The sea was the boundary, and fire the vehicle. A week later, the eland was celebrated. The deceased was spoken of in the past tense. Toasts were made to his valor. Marriages were announced, oaths were renewed. Death reconfigured ties, and the clan continued. Because for the Vikings, dying was sailing. And every funeral, from the axe that splits the forest to the last sip of mead, said the same thing: you are not alone. The bread, the sword, the key, were tools for the journey. The ship was setting sail, but the story was just beginning. When the last cup of mead empties and the echo of the chants fades, what remains is not only the memory of the one who departed, but the marks they have left on those who remain. Because after the fire comes the legacy. And the legacy is not passed on by force or lineage, but by symbols. A sword, a ring, an amulet buried with the dead speaks louder than 1,000 words. For the Vikings, objects were not belongings, they were extensions of the soul. The key in a woman's hand signaled her power to open paths, not only within the home, but between worlds. The ring was more than an ornament, it was a cycle, it was a commitment, it was a bridge between the visible and the invisible. In each tomb, archaeologists found clues, but the clan knew what it was depositing. The dead didn't go naked into the afterlife. They went armed, clothed, and accompanied. And that not only revealed who they had been, but who they would continue to be. Because the spiritual function didn't end with life. The weaver continued to spin destinies. The warrior continued to battle in halls only the initiated could imagine. Even the fisherman, buried with nets and hooks, continued to cast his line in mythical seas where fish were memories and waves time. And then, after the mourning and silence, came something more powerful, the ritual rebirth. Not of the dead, but of the living. The clan had to transform, reconfigure itself. The fire didn't just consume a body, it burned away old structures. The burning ship wasn't just a vessel, it was an institution. Its ashes marked the end of one order and the beginning of another. Children assumed roles, allies renewed pacts, and the ancestors, now fully settled in the other world, began to whisper in dreams. The silence after the funeral wasn't empty. It was preparation. Some listened to the creaking of the trees. Others, the breeze that carried names. Because the dead man hadn't disappeared, he had become part of the whole. The bread hanging on the grave still gave off a scent. And that scent guided them. On special nights, the descendants returned to the tomb, not to mourn, but to ask for advice. And although there wasn't always a clear answer, something in the air changed. Because the ritual never ended. It continued to beat in the words, in the hands, in the decisions. That was continuity. Not linear, not logical, but deeply symbolic. The burned ship left ashes, but those ashes were fertile soil. Because for the Vikings, death was a transition, but also a sowing of seeds. And each funeral, however modest or colossal, planted a seed of transformation in the community. Perhaps that's why, 1,000 years later, we still look at those burial mounds as if they spoke. Because they do. With smoke, with bread, with objects. And every story told gives them a voice. That is the final lesson of the journey. It's not enough to say goodbye to the dead. We must listen to them. Because in their passing, there are clues for the living. And as the smoke dissolves among the trees, and the crows resume their flight, the clan understands the essential: death doesn't interrupt history. It rewrites it. And that, in itself, is a sacred act. Now, after contemplating the ashes, we understand, the Viking funeral was not the end, but continuity in another form. It was not a scene meant to impress, but a spiritual choreography charged with intention. The burning bread is food for the soul. The screaming slave is the echo of an ancestral pact. And the burning ship doesn't sink, it is transformed. When the Vikings banged their shields, they didn't drown out their pain, they echoed their legacy. Today, more than 1,000 years later, we can still hear that call if we remain silent. Because while fire consumes the physical, the sacred remains. And in every rite, however brutal or modest, one certainty beats: the dead don't leave, they simply pass on. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. See you in the next video.